Did you know when you first look at a face, your eyes automatically trace a triangle between the eyes and the mouth? Studies in eye tracking show you look from the left eye to the right, to the mouth and back to the eyes again. This triangle is your brain's system for reading identity, emotion and intent. This is why edges around the features become so important, because we judge and emotionally react to them before anything else. So in this video, I want to show you the importance of the 4 different types of edges, how they can turn flat portraits into dynamic pieces of art, and how you can actually say more with less just with an edge. Okay, so let's start with how edges can actually manipulate how you're looking at an image. Now, I've exaggerated this a bit so it stands out more, but when you look at this cube, you can see everything and your eye takes it all in. When we look at this cube, our vision goes towards here because this is where the sharper edge is. Just like with this cube, your eye goes towards here. And with this cube, your eye just kind of cushions into it. It's the exact same cube, but the edges are placed differently, which makes you see the cube in a different way. This is the power of edges. So what are the 4 different types of edges? Well, I like to break them down into 2 categories. You have your core edges and then you have your creative edges. Each one plays an important role, and if you use them in the correct way, they can transform your work. So your core edges, umbrella under transition edges, this is where you can see the subtle change in your tonal range. So for instance, you can see these transition edges here. You have your focus and outline edges. This is where you have an edge to give an area a starting and stopping point. This is what draws your focus and brings definition to an area. You have your shadow edges. This is something that's really apparent when you have hard lighting on your subject. This is what also really helps with the blocking stage of the drawing. And then you have your creative edges. These use your core edges, but you can vary them in thickness. You can make them super soft, razor sharp, perfectly straight, loose, sketchy. This is how you add personality and feeling to your portraits. Think of edges like punctuation in a sentence. So for instance, I like cooking, my family and my pets. With a comma, I'm listing 3 things that I like, but without a comma, I like cooking, my family and my pets. It reads differently, doesn't it? It's the same with edges. Depending where and how you place them will change the way the portrait reads. So for instance, if we take this portrait here and we compare it to this portrait here, and we pick a focus and outline edge, like the side of the head and let's say the shirt, this portrait has really soft edges and this portrait has a lot sharper edges. Same focus and outline edge, but in a different creative way, which changes the aesthetic of the portrait. The softer portrait has a much more organic feel to it, and the sharper edge portrait has a more focused and definitive look to it. I feel like my eyes kind of just fall down and through this drawing, and my eyes on this one just kind of dart around from area to area. But that could also just be down to the way that this image was also shot, because it has a harder light source, so it also creates these obvious pockets of information that take your eye from one place to another. Now, edges have a level of importance. Some matter more than others, and knowing which to prioritize can make your portraits really stand out. I would say the transition edges are the least important. I'm not saying they're not important, but I would say they're the least important, because as long as your tones are correct, it doesn't really matter if those edges are blended or more defined. Your brain still reads the image as pleasing to look at. Next are your shadow edges. These are crucial for giving your portrait structure and form. They show where the light stops and the shadows begin, which describes it as a 3D shape. This is what creates the integrity of your portrait. And just as important as the shadow edges are your focus and outline edges. These are the lines that give your portrait clarity and tell the viewer exactly what to look at, just like we saw with the cubes earlier. If you skip the focus edge, say on the side of the nose, right? Suddenly the shape gets lost. It turns more into like a transition edge and it fades away, leaving the viewer confused about where the feature ends and another one begins. Now let's make a ridiculous example of this, right? Let's really push this in that direction. What do you reckon the portrait will look like if you leave out all the obvious edges? Well, let's see. It looks weird, doesn't it? Kind of reminds me of like a sponge for some reason. I don't know why, but it definitely feels like something is missing. There's no definition, nothing for your brain to grab onto. But the moment you add those edges back in, immediately the portrait snaps back into focus. Your eye knows where to go and the portrait has shape and character again. But here's the catch. That doesn't mean you should just go slapping on edges everywhere. It doesn't work like that. Let me show you why. What I see happen a lot with beginner and intermediate artists is making edges too harsh, too soft, or in the wrong place. Take the bottom lip, for example. This really confuses people, and for good reason, because it's really confusing. The bottom lip, in most cases, has two edges. There's usually a slight focus edge on the side of the lip, and then it blends into a transition edge more in the middle. This is also portrait dependent. This is not a rule of thumb for everything. I used to struggle with this exact thing. My bottom lips always looked a bit off and I couldn't figure out why. 9 times out of 10, it was because I'd missed this subtle transition edge in the middle. Now if something looks weird in that area, that's the first thing I check. Do I have both edges there? So now we know that the core edges are a must and they give the portrait meaning. But what about creative edges? When and how do we adapt them into our portraits? This is where things get really fun. Once you have a better understanding of the fundamentals, it gives you the freedom to be much more creative. You get to make choices that are about style, not necessarily just about accuracy. Let me show you. Here's the same subject drawn in 2 different ways. If we look at our edges, specifically the focus and outline edges, the drawing on the left, the back of the head has quite a soft outline edge, not too sharp, as I wanted to fade it slightly into the background. But as you can see in this drawing, I have a much sharper edge to tell the viewer this is where the edge of the head is. Without this edge, it looks like this. Now, it doesn't actually look bad without these sharper edges, but that's only because the values are balanced and correct with the rest of the drawing. This dark area gives clarity of where the front of the head stops, and this light area gives clarity of where the back of the head stops. So we have light, dark, light, dark. This is what gives the portrait balance. There's rhythm running through, giving the portrait clarity. And then when I add these edges back in, it just gives it that extra clarity, almost like it's an X marks the spot on a map, indicating where something is. And here's the thing. There's no right or wrong answer with this. When it comes to creative choices, this is your personal preference. Some of you might actually like it without the edge, which is totally valid. Your style is yours to develop. But here's the crucial point. Even with the best edges in the world, they won't save your portrait if your shading isn't working. If your tones aren't correct, the drawing will still feel flat, no matter how perfect your edges will be. So if you want your portraits to look realistic and truly come alive, then watch this video here to master your tonal shading.